Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustavson and Barry Smith.
Welcome to the Breaking Average Show. Man, this is going to be awesome. We are into part 2, Barry. Are you excited?
Oh, man. Almost as excited as when we got into part 1. Maybe even a little more.
I just love talking to different leaders, and here's somebody who's been writing, I don't know how long. I mean, he obviously was in the newspaper business and has written a bunch of books. And it's kind of fun to sit down and have a conversation with them. And we can learn a lot about life and leadership just by talking to some of these thought leaders that are out there, huh?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, you and I both being authors, both, working on new work right now. There's something just a little special too about talking to other successful authors. There's a connection there, and to me, it's inspiring. And I know you're almost done, man, almost done with just a great work that you put so much into. I can't wait for that to get out to everybody else. But yeah, this has just been a great opportunity. The guy who's passionate about what he's doing, it's bigger than him on his own, and he's just trying to add value, make a difference for people. And I love that.
Yeah. And so we're going to dive into interview number 2. And you heard the question asked, but we kind of left you hanging on the last interview, guys. The question was, what is the most satisfying part of the process? So now we get to hear the rest. We get to hear Jason Turbow. And let's have fun with this. Let's just lean in, capture your thoughts and notes. And Barry are going to come back afterwards and just share some of our takeaways. All right. So here it is.
Here we go.
So tell us, what was the most satisfying part of the process?
I think ultimately coming up with something that Kenny and I were both satisfied with. I mean, there were places where he wanted changes that I thought was a mistake, and there are places that I was insisting stay one way that I'm sure he thought was a mistake. And we ended up with this big compromise piece that I'm delighted with. I mean, every excerpt I've read for various purposes, it reminds me, I think this is really good. I'm happy it turned out this well.
Tell everybody, and you and I, we didn't bring this question up beforehand, but I'm curious. I think that everybody would be curious about this. The book isn't necessarily a timeline like from Loggins and Messina days to today, although there was definitely some order to it. That first chapter really kind of sets the tone to everything. Tell everybody a little bit maybe about that story without too many spoilers, and how you kind of discover I think it was you who discovered like that's the opening story we need.
Yeah. Well, from the beginning, my plan was this is going to be based on a chronological framework. It's going to go from the very beginning to the very end. And, there will be some shifts back and forth along the way. There will be some flashbacks and flash forwards. But what I told him from the very beginning was I want to start this book with a great story. Yeah. And I think that great story will become clear when we get to it. And maybe we'll have a small menu from which to choose. But I didn't even need the menu. As soon as I heard the story, it was obvious. I want this to begin the book because it's almost surreal, but it also really explains who Kenny is in a very concise way. And I'm sorry that spoiler alerts just don't matter. I'm happy to tell the whole story.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, share it because it's a story of hope and perseverance. Go ahead, share it.
It is. So Kenny's favorite work he's ever done is a record called Leap of Faith from, I think, 1997, 1993, somewhere in the mid 90s.
Yeah, 93. Yep.
After his string of movie hits, he put out all these kind of number one singles, Footloose and Danger Zone and I'm All Right. That's what he became known for. And at some point, he felt like he was being driven away from who he was as an artist, right? He was the producers and record labels were trying to stick him in this hit making box. And he wanted to tell his own story. That became Leap of Faith. And there's lots of details that go into that are very interesting. But after recording this record, of which he was so personally fond and put so much of himself into, he took the master tapes up to Santa Barbara just to do the overdubs. He recorded it in Los Angeles. His house is in Santa Barbara. The truck with all the equipment and his master tapes en route to Santa Barbara was stolen. It's completely vanished. He's got a meeting with the head of the studio like a month out to see what he's doing with this record, because this record is, I mean, it's called Leap of Faith, and it really was on the record label's behalf, a leap of faith. Like Kenny hadn't put out a hit single in a while. He was still making a ton of money from the label, and they wanted the new boss wanted to know what he had, and there was a good chance that this record wasn't going to be put out if the boss didn't like it, because he'd been cutting artists from his roster left and right as part of his integration campaign. And Kenny had two options. He could re-record everything in a hurry in time for this meeting a month out, or he could proceed as if nothing had happened. And so he still had the slave reels. This is terrible terminology, but that's what they use in the music industry. There's the master reel and the slave reel.
Yep.
And the slave reel is just kind of a low quality mix down that artists can use to listen to while they do overdubs. So he had those. It was not nearly high enough quality to release as a record, but he had the basic tracks. And so he proceeded with his overdubs as if nothing had happened. He's like, I got a month for this stuff to show up. I hope it will. But not even I hope it will. He said, I know it will.
Yeah.
Based on really nothing other than his own faith in the universe. A week passed, and 2 weeks passed, and 3 weeks passed, and still nothing. And less than a week before this gigantic meeting, they get a call from the police department. They found the truck, and where it had been parked for a month, like they just hadn't been on the job. Everything was gone. Everything in the back of the truck, all the equipment, all the instruments, cleared out. The only thing remaining, locked in the cab, were his master tapes. And they hadn't started off in the cab. They were in the back when they left LA. So somebody knew enough to put them in the cab and lock the cab, and he got them back in time, barely enough time to integrate his overdubs. And his album called Leap of Faith really took a leap of faith, both in its creation, its conception, and its execution. And to this day, Kenny talks about that record like nothing else he's ever done. Yeah,
I think it's one of his most satisfying albums, right? From just the sense that I got listening to the book. Yeah. And that's such a powerful story to know that all that equipment, probably pretty expensive equipment, was stolen, but the tapes were still there, which is amazing.
He could have cared less about the equipment at that point.
Yeah.
Like the equipment could be replaced, but those tapes were priceless. It's why he thinks that it might have been an engineer or somebody in on the heist, because they understood how priceless those tapes were to him and locked them in the front. But to this day, he has no idea what happened with that truck, or if it actually did get stolen, or if it was an inside job, or whatever it was. But those tapes came back literally in the nick of time.
It tells you something, like when we go through adversity, whatever challenges that we have, and in that moment, it's like the worst thing that's ever happened to us. But if we're patient, if we're, just have some faith, maybe at some point in time, that story turns around and it becomes really a defining moment for us. And this is for all of us. It's not just Kenny Loggins, but it's for all of us. And Barry, you and I will have to have more conversation on that. But that's a pretty powerful story, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's how we respond to adversity that makes us who we are. And I think that's what I look for as an author, especially a nonfiction author, is how do people or teams respond to adversity and succeed? Like that's I realized early on in my conversations with the various members of the A's of the early 70s, I needed to ask them the big picture question, which is, like, this was a great team. You all kind of hated each other. So what was the secret sauce? Like, what made this team succeed? And there was a diversity of opinions, but hearing all those kind of concepts from the people who were in the thick of it really helped me understand, like, this is how that team succeeded as a team. This is how that player succeeded as an individual. And there's always something to learn. Sports fan or music fan or whatever it is. It's the classic movie conundrum: boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy reconnects with girl. Right? There's adversity and overcoming adversity, and that's the basis for any great story.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. And pull on that just a little bit more as you look back. How important is it? Because this is a fresh look back at history. Your books on baseball. It's really a fresh look for all of us, even though it's in the past. It gives us more awareness of really, I think there's values and maybe virtues that come out of that. But what do you look for? Why is it important to reflect on history and evaluate experience in that way?
Well, like I said, I love telling stories. I love reading stories. I love telling stories. And in a book like the Baseball Codes, I'm telling a series of very small stories that are connected by thematically. But in books about a team or in books about a person like Loggins, you can connect these small picture stories into the big picture stories. And like I said, there's lessons to learn from everybody in every situation. There's ways you can relate to somebody you previously had no connectivity with, right? You're not a baseball fan, but you read this book and like, oh, I actually relate to this human interest aspect. And I think that's one reason why my baseball books are really not so much about baseball. Like there's some on-field stuff, there's on-field drama that's fun to recount, but the bulk of everything I write about is the human interest angle. And so, for example, those A's won 3 straight championships. It would be very easy to divide my book into talking about each of those championships, but instead I focused on one particular drama per season that was very personal and very interconnected and had to do with the team's success, but not on the field. And I thought that was far more interesting than what happened on the field.
Yeah. Guys, you're listening to Jason Turbow. We are talking with him. He is the co-author of the book, Still All Right, that he co-wrote with Kenny Loggins, and that's Kenny Loggins' autobiography. And he's written some fantastic books on baseball, and we're hearing about that and just some of those common themes and threads. So, Jason, and you can follow Jason by visiting him on Twitter at Jason Turbow. Just go to Jason, Turbow. He's on Twitter. And that's how you and I connected, which is great. But tell us, when you write a book, whether it's a baseball book or this one that you collaborated with Kenny Loggins, how do you want the audience to feel, when they read it or hear it?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure I've ever considered that before. I want them to feel satisfied for sure. I've in my own life, I've come to realize that happiness is elusive. I'm a pretty happy person, so that's not a comment on myself, but satisfaction is much more of a day-to-day goal for me than happiness.
Yeah.
Like I think satisfaction will lead to happiness, but you can be satisfied in any capacity of your life. Like you've got a little task at hand. I'm cleaning the dishes. Let's do as good a job as I can at cleaning those dishes. Like there's ways to get satisfaction out of everything you do. And when it comes to a book, I want to be satisfied that I told this story the best way I could tell this story. Does it make me happy that I did it? Well, I guess maybe, but it certainly makes me satisfied. So I think that would be my goal for anyone who reads the book as well, is be satisfied that you've taken the time to read a book and it was worth your while.
Yeah. And I love that answer. And Barry, this ties to something that you and I have heard many times from John Maxwell when he says, it's not experience that matters, it's evaluated experience.
Yeah.
And so when I got done with this book, and I keep reflecting back on the experiences that were shared and evaluating what was written. And it just made me realize the importance of that evaluated experience. So Barry, I'm going to pause and let you kind of share into that, because I know that that's something that resonates with you as well.
Well, it is. And thank you for that. And I love what you said, Jason, just about what satisfies you. That actually plays in. I'm working on a draft, my next book right now, and just had this conversation recently about, at what point am I satisfied? And I didn't use that word, but now you brought it into the conversation. So it kind of gives me some new perspective on that, because I think we're facing that in everything we do in life. At what point are we satisfied? When is it good enough? And we can certainly go overkill on stuff. But I love the way you frame this up of bringing really the story behind the story is how I'm receiving what you've been sharing on this podcast. And I think that's the beauty of it. And especially going back, Kenny Loggins, 70 years plus or minus. There's a lot of story there that social media wasn't able to bring out, just like the A's, just like the Dodgers, just like some of the other works you've done about, we'll call it yesteryear, I guess, for sake of a better way to put it. But to me, that's the value of, really, I mean, for all of us, the three of us in our 50s, there's a lot of value in that, because all we have is memory of, 5 or 6 channels on our TV, and you didn't get the highlights, and the games were the games. And if you saw them, great. And if you didn't, then, go back to your media guide and at least see what happened. And that's all we had. So I think, in my opinion, the things that you're writing about right now, it's a lost art that eventually may be gone. Just everything is so saturated right now.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And so to me, you're a guy who's preserving our past, and I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. I mean, and I hate to say it, but the publishing industry is moving away from the kinds of baseball books I've been writing. Like, they don't want a season in the life of a team anymore, at least not at this present moment. They're going for different kinds of baseball books, which is fine, whatever sells. But the idea of being a storyteller is more difficult now than ever, to your point. And I think ultimately, when it comes down to it, I mean, I used the phrase secret sauce earlier describing the A's, but it also describes Loggins. I think that's, as a nonfiction writer, I think that's the heart of what I want to get into, no matter my subject. What is the secret sauce behind this person or this entity or this group of people that would make someone interested in reading about it? Because there's always something to learn. Yeah. And whether it's big picture or little, you can take something away that feeds your own soul.
Love that.
This ties to the next question I want to ask, which is, what does breaking average mean to you? So I'm gonna put that out there. I'm gonna put the question out there, but I'm gonna give you guys a softball question first, both of you. So let's have some fun with this. But the question I'm going to follow up with is the breaking average question. What does it mean to you? Because it ties to it. But let's just have some fun. We've been talking baseball, talking Kenny Loggins. So I'm just curious. I got to ask, what's your favorite Kenny Loggins song, right? So I'm putting you guys on the spot. But what's one song from Kenny Loggins and you're like, yeah, I like that one.
I will say that an album I was not aware of before this process, he recorded live in Santa Cruz in the 1990s with a band he put together just for this one-off show. It was for a live special. It's called Outside from the Redwoods. Oh. On the UC Santa Cruz campus, I believe. I went to UC Santa Cruz, so my ears perked up immediately. But he reimagined all his songs in a completely different way. He went all acoustic. He had a number of drummers. He had amazing musicians. And everything he did on that record, I love, like his renditions of every song. His version of I'm All Right on that song is fantastic. I mean, among many fantastic songs on that record. Love or hate Kenny. And Kenny's done enough in his career, enough disparate kind of things that I'm sure there's plenty of people who love him and hate him, depending on what era we're talking about. Everything on this record is great.
Wow. Yeah, that album right there. And if you guys get a chance, if you're watching or listening to this podcast, we'll try to put this in the show notes, but the Live from the Redwoods is one of the best live albums of all time. It is phenomenal. And how he did that, right? He shares in the book that it was a 2-day kind of concert, right? He did it one day and then the next day. Mm-hmm. And then, but the video, it's out there for I'm All Right. It's one of the best renditions of that song that he's probably ever performed. It's just fantastic. So
yeah, he got some Cajun musicians in there. Like he really gets some great feels in his songs there.
That was so good. It was good. All right. So I'm putting you on the spot, Barry.
Well, you guys definitely took the more mature route in your answer, because, I'm All Right was definitely one on my list. But of course, that's, the tied it to Caddyshack. Yep. And then, you can't get away without Danger Zone and Top Gun. I mean, and I love that's, really, in a sense, not that it ever went away, but certainly the most recent Top Gun has brought that back into, everybody's awareness at a higher level. But, just an artist. And Jason, you mentioned the Footloose soundtrack. Again, that's the era when we grew up. These were all just big hits, and certainly the connection to the big screen made him even bigger for us. But yeah, what a talented guy for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. He talks about Danger Zone. he speaks about his concerts now and how he wants every song to be meaningful to him. He's at that point in his career. He doesn't want to play throwaway hits that don't mean anything to him. And then he gets to Danger Zone. He's like, well, that one's just fun to play. So it's still in his set.
Oh man. Yeah. There's so many. I went back and I've been listening to different songs, and there's an album I used to listen to all the time. It was called Vox Humana. Mm-hmm. And there was a song that he co-wrote with Michael McDonald called No Looking Back. I just love that song. But I don't know. There's so many good choices. Whenever I Call You Friend, right? That's a great song too. And it's so many good ones.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good ones. That Vox Humana, real quickly. The story behind that is that the label wanted a follow-up to Footloose.
Yeah.
Like, it had been a big hit. They said, give us another Footloose. And so he went back into his tape file. He records all his musical ideas kind of backstage. He kind of jams with himself. And that's where a lot of his songs come from. He went back to the tape that he first had the idea for Footloose on. And that's where he got Vox Humana. Wow. And it actually, it never sold nearly as well as the label wanted it to, but it's a surprisingly good album. Like, there's a lot of good stuff on there.
It is so good. All right. It's one of the gems of the 80s. So if the lost albums of the 80s, that's one of them, Vox Humana. So, and maybe the music video was kind of wonky. So maybe that's why, because everything was driven by music videos back in the day. And the music video had like some kind of painted mural of him and, on the wall while he's singing. And I'm not sure that really worked for him, but the song was great. All right, so let's ask the baseball question. Again, the breaking average question's coming. It's coming. We're teeing everybody up for that. But let's talk baseball, all right? So what's your favorite baseball team?
My favorite baseball team is the San Francisco Giants. I'm bred in the Bay Area. And for Giants fans of my vintage, that means having grown up with nonstop, unendurable, relentless frustration.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned it before we started recording, my childhood was spent banging my head against the wall because the Giants were just terrible year after year, and our arch rivals, the Dodgers, were terrific year after year, and there was never any respite, and the Giants never won anything. In fact, just the other day, one of my wife's friends was over, and I don't know why we were talking about baseball, because she's not a baseball fan and my wife's not a baseball fan, but she asked, who's your favorite player? And my wife started guessing. I'm like, you're not going to guess it. Like, if you don't know it now, you're not going to guess it. And it's Johnny LeMaster, the longtime Giants shortstop, who was one of, if not the worst player in baseball, and yet had a job as a starting shortstop for the San Francisco Giants for a freaking decade.
Wow.
Like, that's how bad they were. Like, I can't begin to, like, he's so bad that he showed up to bat one day in Candlestick Park. He'd taken the nameplate off his jersey, so instead of LeMaster, it said boo, because people had been booing him so relentlessly. They're like, okay, at least now they'll be cheering me because my name is Boo. It was terrible. I mean, he had a good attitude about it the whole time, and I love the guy. Like, in retrospect, especially, I love that that's the face of my childhood franchise, as frustrating as it was, and it made me who I am. And my 14-year-old son just can't begin to imagine what it's like. The Giants have done nothing but win World Series since he's come of baseball consciousness. And now they missed the playoffs. He's upset. Okay, like, at least they had a decent team.
Yeah.
But yeah, that, like, all those years of frustration were tough. And I was blessed enough to get to cover that Giants 2010 World Series. And I was in Arlington, Texas, when they broke their 54-year streak, something like that, some long streak of not winning. But I was in the press box, and as we all know, there's no cheering in the press box.
Oh, you're cheering.
I found like 4 stories that night, and I was the last one out. Literally the last one out. I had to go find a security guard to like unlock a gate for me so I could leave the stadium. And it wasn't until I got into my rental car and closed the door that I could just scream my fool head off for 5 straight minutes. And that was kind of cathartic.
That's awesome.
So it's a long way of saying Johnny LeMaster has a spot near and dear to my heart.
That's so cool. Barry, man, I don't know if we can outdo that one, but what's your baseball story? That was pretty good.
No, I mean, it's just, I think the whole era of the 70s, the A's, the Reds, I mean, the A's have always been my team. Shared a little bit with you guys before. I'm kind of bred into, not born, but raised in the Bay Area, other side of the Bay from Jason, but just some classic memories. I mean, I know it's a little later, but the Quake series, just so many memories out of the Bay. But honestly, I think if I really get down to a player, it will always be Jackie Robinson, talking about perseverance and overcoming. And man, I think I've written just about everything that's ever been written about him. And just, yeah, I mean, it's just a story that will never go away. And I think we continue to see it repeated. It's in a sense, it's sad that we're even still talking about this type of perseverance in any part of our world, but we do. And so that type of stuff, and that'll kind of lead me into my, what does breaking average mean? But I'll let you tee that back up. I don't want to get ahead of the game, Paul.
Well, I mean, it tees it all up, right? Because we're talking about, individuals like Jackie Robinson, talking about breaking average. We're talking about these teams that really transcended average. For me, just baseball, it was, the Nationals winning a couple of years ago, that was pretty huge in our area because we don't win anything here in Washington, and we won actually, the World Series. But that was pretty cool. Of course, we're horrible now, but Cal Ripken, right? So I'm not far from Baltimore, but that was pretty cool too. But the Jackie Robinson, for sure, for me, is probably my number one baseball player that I look back to and seeing what he did. It's great.
Okay, I don't want to derail this too much, but I also run something called the Pandemic Baseball Book Club, which I started with a bunch of baseball authors at the very beginning of the pandemic when we all found our bookstore appearances to promote our books canceled. We started this thing online. I'm drinking the mug right now.
There you go.
See the little logo there?
Okay.
Yeah.
But I bring this up because one of our current titles is by Kostya Kennedy about Jackie Robinson. It's brand new.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
True, The 4 Seasons of Jackie Robinson. And I'm not here to plug other people's books, but this is fantastic.
Okay.
go
I do not have that one. Thank you, Jason.
I'll have to grab that. Cool. That's good. We love books. So yeah, you can endorse any book you got. So that's great. All right. So let's get into that question. What does breaking average mean to you? So Jason, we'll start with you, man. What's it mean to you?
Well, I'll go back to what we were discussing earlier, which is satisfaction. I think no matter what task you're undertaking, do it to the degree you can be satisfied with it. And, I've been a youth baseball coach for well over a decade now, starting with my daughter playing softball and on through my son, who's now 14. And I have had this conversation more times than I can imagine, with kids. In Little League, everyone plays as much as everyone else. But on travel ball, you're going to have bench players and you're going to have starting players. And I've had these conversations with bench players saying, look, because you're not playing in this game or starting in this game does not mean you can't be a useful piece of this team. And everyone has their role to play as best they can play it. And if you're sitting on the bench, that means you be the best bench player you can be. It means being ready to go in at any time. It means supporting your teammates verbally. It means going out to warm up the right fielder if we're in that first base dugout before an inning. There's a zillion ways you can be the best bench player you can be. And guess what? Not only will that bring satisfaction to you, but coaches notice that stuff. And it will have a big picture impact. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. Do it as well as you can, and you've broken average.
I love it. All right, Barry. That's a pretty good setup for you, man. So this is great.
I know. And I think Jason kind of set it up earlier in the call, just talking about this idea of satisfaction. But just to build on that, and you might know, Jason, I forget where this actually started, but the idea of next man up. Right. I don't know who really coined that to begin with, and probably even back before it actually got going.
I just wrote that down beforehand.
So there's our common theme. But yeah, I mean, I gotta agree with you, Jason, and thank you for bringing that into the call, this idea of satisfaction, because I think to break average, we really got to look at what we're doing, anything we're doing in life. And are we going to accept good enough, or are we going to demand from ourselves more than that? At what level are we satisfied with the things we're doing, the type of person we're becoming, the people we're impacting? And so to break average, I think just sets you ahead and apart of pretty much everybody else, and I think that's the difference maker. You bring up this idea of satisfaction and how people have succeeded. I don't think you can really succeed. You definitely can't be significant without breaking average and going to that next level. So I know just from our chat here, I know that that's probably well represented in anything you've written.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well said, guys. That's great. So you guys know my take on it, and it echoes exactly what you guys are sharing. So, I think we're made for more. And I love this story of Roger Bannister. There's the first guy that broke the 4-minute mile. And think about it, right? So everybody else thought it couldn't be done. But once we start to believe in something like, wait a minute, maybe it can be. Who says that we can't, right? So you think of the '80 Olympic hockey team when Brooks, the coach, kind of put that in front of them and gave them that vision of what could be, despite what everybody else says that you can't, doesn't mean that you can't, and Kenny Loggins with the opening story of the book, there's a leap of faith. I mean, that's a powerful name of an album, great song, but an even greater story when you think about that. And that's breaking average. So well said, guys. That's great. So I've got a question for you, Jason. We've got some authors who listen, who watch, but what advice do you have for somebody who's wanting to write a book, or maybe they're writing and they just want to get better at it? What advice do you have for our authors out there?
It's the same advice any writer gives to any aspiring writer: is just write all day, every day, as much as you can. If as a nonfiction writer, I'm not cursed with writer's block, because I don't have to invent a story. The stories are there. I just have to tell the story. If I'm ever stuck, I can just pick up a building block of information I've compiled and synthesize it into a new story. But Studs Terkel, the famous Studs Terkel, once said that sit down at a page until small drops of blood appear on your forehead. That's how you beat writer's block. And it's true, man. If you want to write, just do it.
Yeah.
That's good. I love it. So Jason, how, I've shared earlier the Twitter follow, but share with everybody how maybe you've got a website or a link, or just the Twitter feed's probably the best, but what's the best way for folks to follow you?
Yeah, Twitter's the best. I mean, it got jasonturbow.com with, a compendium of my various work. And up until very recently, I was blogging about baseball's unwritten rules as they happened in real time. I've taken this year off. Just had too much going on. But if you want to see 11 years worth ever since the book came out in 2010, you can go to baseballcodes.com as well.
Wow, okay.
That's cool. Love it. Barry, this has been a great interview, hasn't it, man? It's been awesome.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jason. Yeah.
Jason, we appreciate your time. Thanks for just carving out a bunch of your time today with us and just sharing some stories and really inspiring all of us. So appreciate that.
No, great to be here with you guys. Thanks for the time.
All right. Guys, you've heard it, right? Go buy it. Go grab this book today. Still All Right, Kenny Loggins. And look for the other books by Jason Turbow. Fantastic stuff. So thank you again, Jason. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank
you. Appreciate you, man.
All right. Hey, that was fun, huh, Barry?
Oh, man. I'm telling you. Great interview. Great interview.
It's so cool. I reached out to him last week and I said, hey, any chance you want to just sit down and just have a conversation? And the first question he asked is, because I gave him just a little bit of the questions that we might ask. And one of them was, hey, what's breaking average? And you guys heard that there in the second part of the interview, and we'll get into that here in a bit. But I was thankful that he asked that question, and he really leaned in for us just to understand what it is that we do. And I think he believes in what you guys listening and watching, what you're doing, right? So he writes books to make an impact and to give you more of an understanding. And we talked about last time, sometimes the importance of assessment, and think about some of those books that he wrote and our awareness, it elevates it. Anytime you can elevate your awareness, you're in a better position to lead. And so what were some of your takeaways from that second interview?
Yeah, to that point, I'll kind of combine both now that our listeners have had an opportunity to listen to the entire interview. But I was really intrigued by the dynamic of moving from the kind of nonfiction, right? Some of his early work with different baseball teams and baseball ideas, and then moving into, doing a biography and in a totally different industry. and just, he having the belief that, hey, I got to do something different. I need to get away from what I've been doing a little bit. What got me here is not going to get me there. And then all of a sudden this opportunity comes up with Kenny Loggins, and he just embraced it. And as he shared, it was a different dynamic, kind of all the way through. And I was just totally intrigued, to where that might have just set somebody out, like game over. Like it really changed the model of how he put together a book. And he embraced it, man. Didn't let anything hold him back. And a couple things in there, I'm like, man, I would have quit. I would have gave up if I was all done. And then my partner said, nah, we got to redo all of this.
Right. Yeah, and we heard a little bit of that in the first part last week where he talks about that, and and certainly there's assessment that we kind of, that's how we looked at it. But think about that, right? You have to be strong in your belief to be able to come back despite all you spent all that energy and effort writing, and the other guy takes it and he just chops it up. Because why? They both have the same end goal. When you realize that the other person that you're collaborating with has the same end goal as you, and you both have a belief in terms of where you can take it, hey, you adjust, you collaborate, you find that middle ground, and you make it better. Right. So one of the things that I'm excited about, the reason why I like to do this podcast with you and have these interviews, is it's so much more fun just to have that engagement and be able to bring ideas together. And it's brighter, right? Think about it this way, right? If I have an idea and I bring it to you, my idea is like a candle. It's a light. And I can keep my idea and still give you the light. It doesn't mean my light goes out. It means I gave you some light, and maybe you give something back to me, and we can expand on that. So that whole collaborative aspect that him and Kenny, and really what Kenny does with all his great hits, they're all collaborative pieces, he said. That kind of stood out for me.
Oh, definitely. I'm reminded of, I didn't think about it at the time, but now that we're talking about it, our friend and mentor Scott Fay used to tell us, it's important to be around people who believe what you believe, but think different thoughts.
Yes.
And I use that all the time, because I think that really demonstrates what that collaboration is all about. John Maxwell, me is never greater than we, and I is way too small a word to ever achieve anything of significance. So just little pieces like that we throw those little quips out and we think, yeah, that makes sense. But do we really live by those, those standards and those ideas?
Yeah.
And, my experience, to your, point you make all the time, how much fun we have together. And look, I'm the number two, right? I'm the color guy, but I love doing this with you, man, because you believe what I believe, but think different thoughts. And I think it just gives us an opportunity to grow together. We've done so much together, but this is an opportunity when we've been bringing that third person or fourth person. Man, it's just awesome to see what comes out of that. And it's usually something you didn't even expect, random question, random response, something out of left field. And you're just like, wow, now that hits home.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
What's cool about this interview is because we just had it, the same day that we're sharing this, we just had this interview a couple hours ago. And I don't know about you, but I'll go back and I'll watch it, and I know you probably will do the same. And there'll be even more nuggets that we pull out of it.
Always.
So we're doing our best to share some of the nuggets that we had real time, that just happened a few hours ago, and share that with you guys watching or listening. But go back, watch it, listen to it. First time, there's always something the second time. It's just like you talk about John Maxwell. I've heard him say the same thing multiple times, but then I'll hear something else in the midst of it that I never heard before. Right. So when we go in and listen to somebody and have that discussion and that dialogue, and we collaborate with them, whether we're listening or able to just talk one-on-one with them, there's some nuggets in it. And I just want to encourage you guys with that. The power of belief is not meant to be done alone. Find others around you to step forward who believe in you, who know that you're capable, that you're more than worthy. I've mentioned Brooks, and you heard that in the interview. Brooks, the 1980 Olympic hockey coach, who spoke into a bunch of ragtag college kids that shouldn't have been there, and said, this is your moment. This is your time. Just speaking truth and belief and faith in them. And so maybe for the first time ever in 1980, these guys said, well, maybe we can. Who says that we shouldn't be here? And the same is true for you if you're watching or listening. Maybe it's your turn. Who says that you shouldn't be there? It's your time to step forward. And I want to talk about that. We talked a little bit about courage before, but let's when it comes to belief, how important is courage, Barry?
Wow. I'm in answering the question, where I kind of went back to was, of course, Al Michaels' words, do you believe in miracles? Talking about that 80 Olympics team. And I think that courage comes from the belief, right? You don't have to have the confidence. You don't have to have the competence, the courage. You just need a belief that yeah, maybe we can do this. Al says, do you believe in miracles? I don't think you can have a miracle without that belief. And I certainly believe that, there can be a supernatural element to a miracle, but I think it's a two-sided deal. I think you gotta have a belief that there's more there. There is hope. And that's what's going to allow you to step into the level of awareness, however you want to frame it up. But I think there's an element that has to have that hope, has to have that belief. And that comes from courage, because courage is what allows you to do that. It's one of those things where it doesn't work on paper, and it doesn't have to. That's I think that's what courage is for me.
I love that. I think sometimes hope, this is going to sound, I don't know, hopefully this doesn't sound too Dixie Cup-ish. I think sometimes hope is the rope we need to get to the other side. Hope is that, like, you know what? I just need to pull on something because I'm not feeling it right now. But wait a minute, if I see the opportunity or somebody else sees it in me, like diving off the high dive, I didn't think I could, but my brother said I could. All right, and sometimes somebody else can just share that belief. Hey, I know you can. It's that Coach Brooks kind of moment. This is your time. You're meant to be here. And that kind of hope is something that you can grab a hold of and pull you through it. And maybe we have an opportunity. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Chris Godey. What are we doing to speak belief in somebody else? And that's the opportunity for us. And maybe there's also the opportunity to speak it into ourselves internally, right? To say, you know what? I think I can. I know I can. I have this vision for this. Well, if you have a vision for it, then see yourself achieving it and step forward. So I do think courage is a choice. I mentioned that last time. And when you make that choice of courage, it starts to build confidence in you.
Yeah.
You may not have confidence initially, but if you do it enough, if you step forward with that choice of courage, it's going to create some confidence in you. So, thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, think about it. For anything we try for the first time, you got to have the courage to do it. I mean, it's out of our comfort zone. It's going to feel a little uneasy. Doesn't matter what it is. We're not really smart enough or aware enough when we're young to really be afraid to do things. We just do things. Yeah. But as we get older and we start to feel peer pressure and we start to play the comparison game with others, we're really afraid to step out, to have that courage to, again, a phrase I use often, to do something we've never done before in order to become someone we've never been before. And I think, it goes back to that belief that, hey, I can do this, and I will do this. And then making that decision, right? Making a decision, taking action. We can decide, we got to take action. We got to follow that up. And that's where that courage comes in. And you're spot on. That courage will build the confidence, will build the competence. That's how we grow. but we got to be able to stretch. And that, I don't care what it is, man. It takes courage. It takes courage.
And the other part is, I think courage creates clarity.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Sometimes we just don't, like, well, I don't see it. I have a vision for it, but I don't see the step I need to take. Well, sometimes all you need to see is the first step in front of you.
Yeah.
You may not see step 2 or step 3 until you make step 1.
Have to.
And so take courage, and with courage comes clarity. So
yeah, Paul Martinelli, you got to take action to get a result, and that result, that next step, right, might not be the right one, might not be the outcome you were looking for, but it's a result, right? You had the courage, took the action, got a result. Now you can determine what that next step is. Might require some more courage, right? But and that again is, so many people I work with, coaching and mentoring, they just get stuck on that element. They want to figure out an easy way to do it, a way that doesn't require courage, a way that doesn't require a new belief. Just give me the steps and I'll do it. We've got to become someone before we start doing things.
Yeah.
It starts from within, and that all starts with belief.
Yeah. So it's so important. I think this power of belief is something that we're created with. I'm a person of faith, and I believe the way that our DNA has this power of belief. But I think there are forces out there that try to take away that power of belief in us.
Oh, yeah.
And we talked about the gaps and the gains last time. And if we just look at the gaps, and if we do the comparison thing, like you just mentioned, then over time, there's a narrative that takes place, and we start to water down our belief. But realize there's opportunities for us. That power of belief is still in you. The question that my wife asked, or she was my girlfriend at that time, that changed my life in the midst of the biggest challenge that I ever experienced education-wise, and I didn't think I was going to graduate. And she saw it. And then she asked this question, but do you still have hope? And when she asked that question, it penetrated me. It just broke up that barrier that was there. And I realized, yeah, I still got hope. I still have hope. And that's what I needed, to see that hope so that I could take step of courage forward. And I was able to get through it, which was powerful. It's kind of interesting, Barry, because at that time, I just told you the story of what my girlfriend, now my wife, told me, was when Kenny Loggins was in his heyday, right? Footloose and Danger Zone, right? We had some fun talking about the music, right? Just in that interview. What was your song that you picked again? I forget.
Danger Zone.
Yeah, Danger Zone. Great song.
Took the easy out, man.
No, but they're good ones, right? But there was a song that came out a few years before that was sort of a defining moment for me. And I remember now, it's kind of like fresh. When I was in high school, I was on the track team. And I never really heard of Kenny Loggins. I don't think Footloose was out or anything. Maybe it just came out. My brother was a big fan of that, so I just didn't. I just knew a little bit about his older stuff. But there was a song called "This Is It." You ever heard that song? "This Is It."
Oh yeah.
And somebody on the track team in the back of the bus had a Walkman. Remember Sony Walkmans?
Of course.
And I don't remember the exact line of the song, but I just pulled it up, the lyrics. So bear with me. I'm just going to read a couple of lines. But here it was, a defining moment. We're going to regionals. We're about to compete. And it was the biggest race of the time. And Coach Windsor, I love Coach Windsor, and he believed in us. And he was kind of like the Coach Brooks kind of, that kind of coach. But this song, in addition to Coach Windsor, this song really helped me. And here it is. I'm just, again, I haven't looked at the lyrics before our call, but I just pulled it up. It just came to mind. So the song's called "This Is It." There have been times in my life I've been wondering why. Still, somehow I believe we'll survive. Now I'm not so sure. And he continues on, but the chorus is, make no mistake where you are. This is it. Your back's in the corner. This is it. Don't be a fool anymore. This is it. The waiting is over. Right? Nowhere, no way to hide. No time for wondering why. It's here. The moment is now, about to decide. And I love that because it really kind of compels you. You're like, yes, all right, I'm ready. This is the moment.
Yeah.
So again, thank you, Kenny Loggins.
It goes back to the courage.
Yeah.
If you go back, you don't have to, but if you went back and went through those words again, there's courage written in like every little segment. And I think that's a difference maker. When you look at what I love about Jason, working with Kenny to tell that story, there's courage in there. There's courage in his early work. There's courage just in what he does. One of the comments I made there is that he's preserving our past.
Yeah.
During the conversation, I really feel that way. I mean, we're all three of us are in our 50s. Yeah. And, for you and I growing up in the 80s and the 90s, especially the 80s, that's when we were like into sports, playing sports.
Yeah.
I mean, that was our whole world. And he's preserving a piece of that I believe is going away now. I think everything's so fast. It's all social media. Everything happens real time everywhere. And it's just changing. And so, again, you look at the work he does, you even look at the artists like Kenny Loggins, amongst, hundreds of other, artists that have been putting together music for the last 50 years. Look at how it's different today. It's just different. And so these stories about hope, about courage, about belief, all of that are just very powerful. And I'm glad we had a chance to talk to a guy who still appreciates that's out there for us.
So good. Well, this has been a great podcast. So we need to cap this one off. We've had it's been a little bit of a long one, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed watching this and listening to this. Barry, any final tips and challenges that you want to share with our listeners?
Just get courageous. It's probably a question you've all heard before. It's when last time you did something for the first time. Go out and do something for the first time. Go out and do something you haven't done before. Make that your mission this week. See what happens. Let us know.
Yeah. And I would say, this is it. The waiting's over. Go make a difference. You were meant for this moment. Go make a difference. So guys, thanks for watching and listening to the Breaking Average podcast. You can check us out on all the different podcast platforms or go to breakingaverage.com. Again, thank you to Jason Turbow. It was a pleasure sitting down and chatting with you today. And thank you for your work. If you haven't yet, make sure you go by Jason's work that he did with Kenny. Still All Right. Or any of his great baseball books. All right, Barry, this has been fun.
Here we go, man. Can't wait for the next one.
All right, well, guys, we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
That's good.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.